All right, here we go. Welcome, everyone. I'm your host, Neil Mansilla, a developer advocate at Atlassian. Thanks for joining us today as we dive into tips and insights for building a winning app submission for Codegeist. For those who may not know, Codegeist is Atlassian's global hackathon, sparking innovation in the Atlassian ecosystem since 2006. This year, Codegeist returns with $170,000 in cash prizes, along with a fresh new theme around something that we call the system of work philosophy, which we're going to dive into deeper today. Before we get started, I want to go over a few housekeeping items. The webinar is being recorded and will be shared afterwards. Also, this is an interactive session, so we welcome your questions. Just drop your questions in the Q&A feature in Zoom, and we're going to address those at the very end. All right, let's dive into today's discussion. We have a stellar panel of experts that I'm honored to have with us today. They've all navigated the journey from ideation to successful app development and deployments. And collectively, these individuals have built winning Codegeist apps, are subject matter experts on a range of topics, and represent teams and companies that are succeeding in and helping to grow the thriving Atlassian ecosystem. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then we can get started with a round of introductions. So maybe Alvaro, could you kick us off with an intro?
Yes, for sure. Thanks, Neil. And hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So my name is Alvaro Aranda, and I work as an engineering manager. I have been working for Dacer for more than 10 years, and in all of them, I have been focused on creating apps for the Atlassian marketplace. Through these years, I have been working with different frameworks to build Atlassian apps, from server now to Forge. And currently, we are really focused on building new Forge apps, but also in moving our Connect apps to Forge. And lastly, I want to say that the last year, I was in your shoes because we were participating in the Atlassian Codegeist, and we will succeed. We won the competition.
Nice. Very cool. Bastian from Draw.io and Cybert Media. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Thank you, Neil. Hi, I'm Bastian. Like Neil already had on his slide, I'm the subject matter expert for Draw.io. Myself, I'm around in the Atlassian ecosystem for more than 15 or 14 years now. Draw.io itself is around since 2014 on the Atlassian marketplace. So we are a mature app. Probably every one of you know the Draw.io diagrams and whiteboards apps for Confluence and Jira. I am with the team since 2019, and I'm dealing with customers. So communication is my day-to-day work. Of course, also internal communication, getting input from our dev team, but more or less the customer side is where I focus on getting insights from customers, questions from customers. So what I do today, more or less, is sharing from you the views that, like, how to get. In Germany, we say you are between two chairs, saying how can we focus on, for example, stuff like moving from Connect to Forge, at the same time taking care that all the needs of customers and all the questions of customers are met. And I think that's also something we will dive into today, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Awesome. Thanks, Bastian. Nitin Kumar from AWS. Please introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, Nitin here from Sydney, Australia. It's early in the morning. So I work as a partner solution architect in AWS, and I'm responsible for managing the ISV partners in ANZ, and Atlassian obviously being one of them. I've been working with Atlassian for, I think, close to 2.5 years now. And courtesy of our joint partnership, I have the privilege of attending a lot of partner events, which gave me enough perspective on what's happening in an overall Atlassian ecosystem. On a personal front, I've got 20 plus years of experience in the industry, mostly in the infra space, and obviously come with deep expertise in AWS cloud and marketplace in general, more specifically on AWS. And I'm keen to kind of learn from the panel and provide AWS perspective to this discussion. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thanks for being here with us, Nitin, so early in the morning. And last, we have Ian Buchanan, a fellow Atlassian. Please introduce yourself, Ian. And unmute yourself, Ian.
Until recently, a peer of Neil's in our developer advocates team. So if you've been around the developer community, you've probably seen me in there saying hi and answering questions, and I'm still there. I have recently moved over in the last month or so to help our efforts in working with customers to adopt Rovo, our latest AI product, which is also featured here in this Codegeist. Yeah, so that's really exciting to be in front of customers, helping them solve their AI challenges.
Awesome. Thanks, Ian, for joining. All right, let's kick us off with some questions. Earlier this year, Atlassian introduced the system of work. And in a nutshell, system of work is an approach for how teams should work together to be more effective. We all know that teams need three things: aligning the work that they're doing to goals, tracking that work, and sharing knowledge. To do that, teams need a common data model and products with discrete jobs to be done, and that all has to work seamlessly together. And of course, the ability to extend those tools is also very essential. So I'd like to start off from hearing from the panelists, their perspective on the state of teamwork. So Nitin, coming from the behemoth of a company like AWS, right? Let me ask you, what are some of the challenges or organizations are facing in an increasingly remote and distributed world? And how can the right tools help teams get work done?
Yeah, sure, Neil. I guess first, it's public knowledge that AWS has recently announced the RTO next year. And we have had some strong opinion either side because it's a big change on everyone. But I guess one thing that I will definitely agree with this messaging is, or the challenge that I do see working remotely is that fostering that strong team culture, maintaining productivity, collaboration, and that sense of cohesion among team. For example, I can give you the Amazon example that we are pretty big on hands-on whiteboarding sessions, right? To hash out ideas and problems, gather a couple of essays, go to a room and just kind of do whiteboarding. With everyone remote, it does lose its edge a bit, but similarly, we are pretty huge on writing culture. It's something that I've never observed myself when I joined Amazon. We don't do too many PPTs. It's always you have to write like big narrative documents, and everyone gets into a meeting room, and jointly they just first 20 minutes just read that narrative, and then we open it up for discussions. So yes, having to do it like in front of everyone in a meeting room is definitely a big plus. But having said that, I think everyone is adult. I mean, one of our leadership actually has mentioned in one of our town halls that we have hired adults to work with adults. So, which means we expect people to take ownership and kind of adapt to the changing environments. And having the right tools can definitely make a difference here, right? So we all are, across collaboration tools like Amazon Chime or Slack or Zoom for those instant meetings. We are on Zoom right now as we are doing this webinar across different regions, and even tools like Atlassian, Jira, or Trello that can provide central visibility into the different projects, tasks, or the team activities that do. So I guess that's yeah. For an integrated workforce experience, I think having the right tools is definitely a big plus.
Got it. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Bastian, what's your perspective on this coming from Dry?
Yeah, one big plus to what Nitin just said, like tools. I mean, being around with the Atlassian ecosystem for some time, I know that one of the big plus, or the big pluses, it's not only one, of the Atlassian ecosystem is that we always follow this single source of truth approach. So I think when we come from tools, as good, the more the tools are embedded and the more tools are connected, the more it kind of services the people working with it. The more you have the less you have misunderstandings, and the better the outcome is. Of course, at the same time, and I think that's also something that Nitin mentioned, is it's always people working with tools, and me being part of a remote team, and we're also working from two continents like North America and Europe. We know there are some kind of barriers, right? There are cultural barriers, time zones. I mean, it sounds so silly, but time zones can be a challenge. So how do you kind of achieve people like ending their work and enable others to pick it up while it's still warm, and don't waste time on the result. So this is, of course, means that, again, that was a very great sentence. I want to build up on top of that. Adults working with adults, being aware of differences, working towards a shared team culture. So taking every culture and every kind of, everything that people bring to the table and make one new culture out of it. And then I think you have a very cool mélange, the Austrians would say, between tools and people, and then that's what creates success.
Got it. Thanks for sharing that. That's really insightful. Alvaro, and then Ian after Alvaro.
Okay, I will also say that it may be difficult to align all the people that is working in a company, especially if the company is big enough or people are working remotely. And I think that alignment is so important and it's related with productivity and collaboration. And these are key factors for a company. So I think system of work is really important for that, because it's going to put all the goals in the center of everything, in the center of teams, in the center of people that are working in a company. And I also will say that perhaps teamwork graph can also increase the feeling that people may have of belonging to a company.
Got it. Ian, I mean, I've seen how we as a company at Atlassian have like evolved from a whole bunch of different teams doing different, doing their ways and doing their things in different ways, and like we're kind of consolidating in how we communicate and work as a team, like company wide. I'd like to hear your perspective on this.
Yeah, we've really had some changes over the years since I've been here, and like there's a lot to it. It has to do with our growth and kind of figuring out how we're going to fit in that. But I really liked to hear that both Bastian and Nitin like wove and Alvaro too. Like that there is a key aspect that even as we reach for tools to help us do this, can't lose sight of the people. And I feel kind of old school having to say that, like it's a 20-year-old agile thing to say people before tools. But that's kind of how I first want to look at it. That one of the things that we are gifted with here in Atlassian is that we do get a high degree of autonomy and the ability to use the tools the way we want to. I think for a long time what we would lean into, for example, would be anybody could spin up Jira. It's free for us, and then that meant every team could have their own way of running Jira. Well, thankfully, we kind of figured out, well, our customers want that too, and we move from this like very kind of heavyweight one size fits all company managed project thing to having team managed projects, which to me is a really strong signal that we are looking for all of the ways that we can empower teams to make the tools their own, to reflect the kind of self-organization that we would do, and then that we hope our customers do as well. So so I certainly hope that even as we talk about system of work and what we're thinking there is that I hope our customers don't interpret that as a big kind of rubber stamp, one size fits all kind of approach. I hope that customers make the system of work their system of work.
Totally agree. Yeah, and I would definitely echo the fact that we have, even individual teams have their own system of work, and I think having some guidance for the greater teams to be able to kind of follow, but not necessarily like you're saying, it's not this is exactly how you must do it, right? But the tools and some of the principles are kind of keeping us aligned. Okay, awesome. Thanks for sharing all that, everyone. Let's go on to this next question area here, and it's about ideas, right? So, creating impactful solutions, like coming up with something that's like really, really impactful to customers, it can feel really daunting, especially because there are countless ideas and areas to explore. And I'm looking for advice on what you guys might give to participants in this hackathon for identifying like a standout app idea. And I'm going to start with you, Ian. because you've been in a long time Atlassian employee, and I know you're very keen on defining problems well before embarking on solutions, right? I'm very much the engineer type. I'm like, hey, let's start coding this thing. You're like, whoa, slow down. Let's make sure we're defining this problem well. So let me ask you, what advice do you have for the participants in the hackathon about finding that really standout app idea?
Yeah, and that passion. Yeah, I was glad you mentioned that. But I am passionate because I've played both sides. I've been a product manager in previous life, and much more developer facing now. And to me, there's something magical that happens when you can bring those mindsets together. And so I find, like, I take inspiration a lot from a kind of long held passion in the open source community about the scratch your own itch approach. Now, that's not the guarantee to go all the, like, oh, this will definitely be a great thing, but you get a kind of a wonderful combination of a deep understanding of the problem because it's mine, I know it, and that means you can represent it better. That means you can help make sure that the people that you're pitching it to understand what you were trying to solve. And then at the same time, that means that, like, you've reduced the variables down to, like, okay, now it is a question about how do I solve it. But it's a lot easier to do it that way than when both are variables. And I'm sure Bastian knows this as a professional product manager, that, like, both sides of the when both are variables, it's really hard. So that's a hard starting point. I think if you're going to do this quick in a Codegeist kind of situation, then starting with the passion, like, what is your own problem? Solve that. That's a pretty good way to make sure that you get to a good result.
Awesome, thanks. Alvaro, to you next. I mean, are there any frameworks or tools or processes that you and your team rely on to like streamline ideation, uncover, really cool and unique opportunities at Deezer?
Yes, and to start with, I will say that my suggestion, my advice will be not to start thinking about what ideas will you try to cover when there's a competition like that, like the Codegeist, but to have a continuous discovery process to gather ideas continuously all over the time. After that, if you have a lot of ideas, you will have a backlog of ideas. To manage that, we have been using Jira Product Discovery. And when you have a backlog of ideas, you need to prioritize your ideas. And for that, you need to use a model. In our case, we are using the RISE model. So when
what's the Royce model?
You can define, for example, you can work with effort. You can try to put different efforts, different confidence, and all different things to try to evaluate different ideas and to be able to prioritize them. So it's a framework, it's a model that tries to give you power to be able to give different points to different ideas, and then trying to see what have more points of these ideas in your backlog. These ideas are perhaps the ones you need to cover. So when you have those ideas and you select one of several of them, my advice here will be not to start developing right now, but to stop and to say, okay, let's see if we have some competitors out there, and also let's talk with potential customers, not to build the app the way we want, but perhaps the way our customers will need in the future. So this will be my strongest suggestion here. Try to build not what you want, but what your customer needs.
Nice. And so, Bastian, I mean, you said that your profession is talking to a lot of customers, right? So, what's your perspective on this?
Yeah, I have to admit, I come from a very mature background. So our apps are around for some time. So we're talking about, we already have apps on the marketplace, and we are kind of we are adding features to that. So we are well established. So we do have the blessing of having a quite large community of users. But what we do each and every day, talking, listen, or even more important, listening, and try to read between the lines. So we are in contact with almost everybody. We're, of course, following the Atlassian community, what is always a big plus. We are following up on tech support tickets, even if the need for support or the support itself has already been done. So even us as for me as the subject matter expert, I try to scan it and say, oh, I think there is something else behind that question, and I want to know what it is. So we always try to have that kind of like Henry Ford approach, although this kind of that statement is quite old. But if I ask people what they want a faster horse. We don't want to build the faster horse. We want to build the car, right? So and thinking outside the box, listening to what people really want, and from there on, try to create real value. I know that is tough. Coming up with outstanding app ideas is tough. If it was so easy, I think all of us would just focus on writing books instead of being here and selling that for millions and millions of dollars. But listening to people, asking questions, get behind what they really want, and then create value that is not that easy to reproduce is the key for us.
Very cool. Nitin, I mean, I think AWS has a service for everything under the sun, and perhaps maybe from a solution architect perspective, what are your thoughts about, advice in terms of, how do you see the people that you're, solution architecting for, how do they kind of streamline? What are the processes they use to kind of uncover unique opportunities, and know that they're working on the right thing?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I love the way Jan and Bastian has explained. I think we need to get back to the basics. First and foremost, solve a problem, right? And for that one, you can leverage the tried and tested approaches like user research, your customer forums, read negative reviews for that matter on a product, and see if there are any recurring problems that you see or any patterns that you see in those support tickets as well. And second one, I would say is kind of comparative to the previous one is be creative, right? Sometimes the most impactful solutions are the one that solve problems customer never knew they had, right? For example, look at where we are with the Gen AI. Did we really thought that we will have an AI that could generate custom content or write code for me, or we were asking for that solution? I don't think so, right? And from a process standpoint, I believe I'll bring again the AWS perspective in it. We have this process called a working backwards, where the core idea is to start with the customer experience that you want to create. As a technical folks, we tend to get into the solutioning mode pretty quickly, even on the calls as well. The moment someone explains a problem, we quickly get into, oh, we can solve this problem by X, Y, and Z. But always keep focus on what the customer experience that you want to create, rather than focusing on the features or the tech that you want to use. And this principle, but the mechanism behind this principle is that it forces you to really think about the specific problem you're trying to solve or the experience that you want to deliver. And we even take it a step further, that rather than just thinking about that experience, we always write what we call, I mentioned earlier that we are pretty big on the writing culture. So we do write what we call as a PR FAQ or the press release, right? That once this solution will be launched, how do you want to announce it to the world? Again, bringing or marrying these two concepts together, the idea is when you write that something down, it brings a lot of clarity to what you're trying to achieve. And then if you are going to announce it to the world, what is the customer experience, what's the problem you solved, what's the results that you're going to get, and so on. So my advice would be to kind of embrace that mindset and think about what's the transformative experience that you want to create. What is the single most important thing that you want to solve with your app? And as always, just keep the customer experience in mind.
So valuable, honestly. I mean, I think that, yeah, I like how people are saying it's kind of fundamentals, right? Kind of have to get back to basics. And yeah,
Yeah.
I think not just jumping into solution mode is a big, it's a big first step, particularly if there's developers here in the call that are hacking me at Codegeist. I get it. Maybe you're thinking about just kind of jumping right in, but it probably would pay huge dividends to have some conversations with some potential users, right? Not necessarily about finding market fit right now, but it's just about like, is this really solving a problem? Is this a real problem? And will it resonate, right? Cool. All right, I'm going to jump into something a little more technical, and that's talking about Forge. So Forge is Atlassian's cloud development platform, designed to simplify building scalable and secure apps for products like Jira, Confluence, JSM, Bitbucket, Compass, and most recently Rovo. It offers tools and capabilities to help developers create apps faster than ever. Alvaro, Deezer has been involved in the Atlassian ecosystem, I think almost from the beginning. So I'm going to start by asking you, for new developers to Forge, what's your advice for getting started quickly and building effectively?
Okay, so my first advice here will be to follow the Getting Started guide that we have for Forge. I think it's a really good documentation, and you are going to be able to create your first Forge app in just some minutes. So it's perfect. And it's also available for different Atlassian products. So if you're going to build for Jira, for Confluence, for Bitbucket, there's an example there how to do it. And as I said, in just a few minutes, it's going to be ready. So this is going to be my first advice. And then if you want to improve the features you are going to provide with your app, I suggest every people here that to see and to review the documentation about limitations and quotas. Because as you mentioned, Neil, Forge is a cloud platform, and as a platform, it may have some limits, and it's important for you to review them before trying to develop something that it's not going perhaps to be able to be developed in Forge right now. So this will be my second suggestion. And my third suggestion will be that Forge enables you to work with serverless approach for the backend. So if you are not related with cloud development and with serverless development, it might be challenging in the beginning. So I will suggest people to read something or to try to have more context about this kind of model of developing the serverless one.
Got it. Yes, indeed. I think that if you are into building things that are not asynchronous or like functions as service, not familiar with lambdas, etc., yeah, it could be a little bit of a shock. But I do think there's some great examples, right, to follow that are out there that you can try out. So, Ian, what are some of your thoughts here about Forge? What's some advice you have for folks that want to kind of get started in being effective quickly?
I have a hard time not just almost like repeating Alvaro's, but with slightly different words, because there's some really good nuggets in there. I think for example, from the perspective of, like that first step into serverless, I think that's one of many things. There's like, one of the things that you have to understand about Forge is that it is opinionated. And that's, in some cases, like, yeah, there are multiple opinions, but there are opinions, and you have to start with a kind of healthy respect for those. This is not a kind of open-ended, you can build everything or anything the way that you want to. And if you go into it with that in mind, then I think you can start to respect the guardrails that are there as actually helping you be productive. An example of that is the way that we like just sort of magically handle auth against our own products. Really takes a whole lot of kind of hard work away. Can be quite tedious to make sure you get all that right, and the abstraction we put over that, just you really almost never have to think about it. So one is the opinions, and I think then the other, like again, like Alvaro is saying, is like, I know it sounds almost silly to say read the getting started, because well, of course you should, right? But a lot of people do try to skip over that, and in general, I think that Forge can be a little bit tricky getting started because of the opinions. That means people also try to jump straight to the solution they want to build, and sometimes forget that, like, maybe you should just start with the template, make sure it runs, because if you start to, like, I don't know, what I kind of find in the community is people ask about a problem that they've gotten to that is actually a compound problem, something that they've actually, like, they tried to jump all the way to the end, and then there are actually several layers of problems that you have to unroll. So just like the getting started, I think start with the template, make sure you get it running, make small steps as you make the changes until you really become deeply familiar with those concepts and opinions, and that like that Forge has. So that's my take on it.
Awesome. That's the great advice, by the way. Yeah, the getting started. I haven't counted the keystrokes to a T, but I think it's about 120 keystrokes to like an actual functioning hello world on your dev instance, which is pretty incredible, right? Um, Bastian, any advice?
I mean, obviously, I'm not an engineer, so I can't add much to the discussion from the dev side. Although I have to admit that the documentation is really great because when I jumped in for this webinar, I was like, okay, I have to get even deeper to Forge, and I desperately read the documentation. I was like, cool, I'm not in dev, and I understand that. That's cool. That's great. So the documentation is great. One maybe advice that I can bring in from the sales and marketing side anyway is try to get as much knowledge about the dynamics that are in the Atlassian ecosystem at the moment. So we still have, I mean, server is no more, but we still have a situation where a lot of customers are moving from, for example, data center to cloud, so from on-premise to cloud. These customers bring their specific needs to the cloud. I mean, being European, maybe our home markets are a little bit more special, so to speak, when it comes to all of the stuff that you have to tackle. But all of these needs are important. They're essential when developing an app idea. And sometimes you just have to keep that in mind when providing value, because the app can be as good as it is if it, for example, just doesn't provide the need of security and stuff. You need to be aware of that. You just need to kind of read the momentum in the market at the moment. And there is so much moving from Connect to Forge, from on-prem to cloud. It's really, I mean, it's so interesting. I love that energy that is in the market at the moment. But being successful with an app, you need to kind of be able to read the dynamics in the market, like I said. So if you have the opportunity to get into that as much as possible, take the advantage, even if that kind of indicates that you have to talk with sales and marketing guys like me.
And by the way, when you're saying like, oh, you're not a developer, I mean, when we hold the developer training sessions at the team conferences, the one we did in Vegas, as well as the most recent one in Barcelona, I mean, the majority of the folks that sign up for that are, well, they're customers because they're at the team conference most likely, but they're admins. These are not like professional software developers. They have some like hackery skills when they're building scripts and things like that, and I think that they find that the things that Ian, you were talking about, some of that heavy lifting that's done by the Forge platform it just makes it a lot easier to kind of get started. And so you don't have to be like a bona fide software development professional to start kicking around with Forge. Yeah. Nitin, any thoughts here?
Yeah, I think similar to Bastion, I'm not a Forge builder, so won't give any direct advice, but courtesy of the partnership, I've again had the privilege to speak to many of your partners, and do agree I've captured quite a few opinions on Forge. I guess my general advice is to define the use cases and do a parity check whether Forge can meet all those requirements as well. And it's interesting that I see a lot of similarities actually when we talk to like non-cloud customers in AWS and the typical infrastructure as a service customer moving on to PaaS or the SaaS world as well, right? It's a similar thing that obviously when you have the control, deploying something on your own environment, it's hard to let go of that control. But the moment you start realizing the benefits that a PaaS option or a SaaS option gives you, you start kind of, complementing those features within your environment as well. So I guess the only advice I will give is don't be afraid to experiment. Try out these ideas, and if things are not working, do provide feedback to Atlassian, because that will define the roadmap for Forge. And yeah, as everyone has said, do read the documentation and figure out whether the use cases that you're after will be solved on Forge or not.
Very cool. Thanks for sharing. Okay, I'm going to move over to the next question. I want to talk about this bonus prize category we have called Runs on Atlassian. Now, if you want to compete for this prize, you're going to have to build an app that doesn't have any egress permissions. That just means that there are tighter controls around the data, and any data that the app is using stays contained within the Atlassian platform. So What do you guys think about this no egress architecture and its importance to to some of today's users? And maybe Bastian, I'll start with you, being in Europe. When interacting with Draw.io customers, is data control and data egress a topic that your customers bring up?
Definitely, definitely. I would say, and I mean, to be honest, the big customers is where the money is, correct? And the big customers are the ones that we want to serve their needs. Um, with Draw.io, we have always kind of provided data residency. So this has always been a very important issue to us, and we know, and our customers rewarded that. So they were looking for it. Like with the last question I just mentioned, we have that, and this is very important. We have that data center to cloud shift. And here we are talking about customers who came or come from an on-premise view, where they had total control over their data. And of course, moving to cloud brings up this kind of like this devil on the shoulder, like risk aversity. Oh my God, we need to cover that risk. So dealing with the topic of egress is a must-have. So, like I said, this is where the money is, and you need to take care of that. I deal with big clients each and every day, reading through legal amendments. Although we have EULAs and stuff, they are very precise, and at the same time, we always have to kind of sign custom amendments, and of course getting to a level where we can deal with egress on an efficient level, so so we are able to scale, is our primary goal.
Got it. Alvaro, you must have some thoughts on this as well.
Yes, and I will focus my answer looking to the data. And for that, I think that customers are looking to trust apps in two different ways. How and where apps are storing their data, and also how apps will manage this data. For that, you will need perhaps to be certified in SOC 2 or in an ISO or whatever. And this is going to take some time for your company and also requires an investment. Or you have a second option here. You can build a Forge app that by default are going to store the data in the Atlassian servers, and it's going to make by default that the customers are going to trust your apps. So yes, for me, it's really important that all the data are going to be together, and customers are going to trust you because you have one of those, or you have some certifications, some security certifications, or you are storing the data all inside the Atlassian platform.
Awesome. That's some sound advice. Nitin, I imagine that you have a perspective on this at AWS.
Oh, for sure, for sure. At AWS, we have always believed that security is the top priority, and we always call it as job zero. So this one is actually pretty close to heart. And let's not discount the fact, I think customers are becoming increasingly aware of the apps or vary of the apps that export data, especially when it comes to sensitive PII or business information or customer data for that matter. There's just too much of risk involved, whether it's in terms of the compliance or it's in terms of the brand damage that can happen if anything goes wrong. So if you are building apps that keeps all the data, contained within the Atlassian platform, you are actually creating a much more secure and controlled environment. And from a developer standpoint, I guess it also simplifies a lot of the governance challenges as well that otherwise you would have to deal with. And I'm aware, as I said, that there are some customers who would still prefer to have that control or retain that control. But then in AWS, we always call security is a shared responsibility. So if you have those customers who want to retain the control of the data and they, make a conscious decision to kind of go that way, just make sure that your customers are aware of their shared responsibility model and who is responsible for what in that case. So it's really, really critical that the customers are also kind of bought into that decision.
Got it. Awesome. I remember when GDPR became like a big topic and thing that we were focused on at Atlassian. I remember we were talking early with partners about, this is before Forge was a thing, but I remember a couple pieces of feedback were like, yes, please, we don't want to touch any of that data. right? Like
Yeah.
much better if it were more like on P2 on the servers on the data center side where it's not like Connect where we actually have to like interact with that. Like we want hands off if at all costs. Ian, what are some of your thoughts in this area?
Yeah, I'm really torn here. I like there's a personal part of me, like something I didn't mention in my intro is that a sort of long-term project, if you will, that I've been involved with for Atlassian, even within the developer advocacy side, is the role of partner engineer with some of our largest uh, like cloud peers. That's how I know Nitin, for example, is that I kind of helped work with him and some of his teams on building things like integration between Code Catalyst and Jira. And I'm very proud of those things. They don't run on Atlassian. And so some of the things I'm proudest of run off Atlassian. And I think, like it's pretty clear to me where I sit now with Rovo that there's a big set of value in the things that we connect to, and that's going to be outside of Atlassian, or that I look inside Atlassian and know for sure we would collapse as a company if we could not integrate Salesforce and Jira. So there are a lot of things that are valuable in linking out. But I think Bastian really hit on something very important here, that our customers, especially our largest ones, have been trained, or if you will, about kind of coming to depend on a certain degree of control that they have over the data, and knowing when those outside connections are being made, and being able to really understand and control those as well. So when it comes to cloud, I think the big thing to understand is that we have an incredible range of customers that we have to satisfy. Like a question that I would get from a lot of these SaaS vendors that we would work with would be, well, what's your average customer size? We have 300,000 customers, so the average isn't that big, but that's because we have a weird distribution. It's not a normal curve. We might be in the tens of for what's average, but our scale goes up to that there are customers with tens of thousands of users in our cloud. Even if that were only like 0.1% with 300,000 customers, that's still 3,000 customers. So Bastian's point about like, well, that's where the money is. That's what you kind of have to get your head around, is we have to manage for that whole spectrum. And I think that the idea of runs on Atlassian is a really clear and simple way for customers who need that kind of sense of control back. It's an easy label for them to relate to. So for the right kinds of apps, yeah, that is a really good goal. Get into the runs on Atlassian, but please don't interpret that as thinking that Atlassian only wants apps that run on Atlassian. So I believe there's room for both.
Oh, I think so too. I mean, some of the most popular apps on the marketplace today are integrations, right? With CI/CD platforms, if you just look at the install numbers. So yeah, totally. I don't think it's zero sum, but I do think that if your app is not, if it doesn't need to egress data, then don't, right? But if it was something that was intrinsic to the value, then obviously that it would not be a runs on Atlassian categorized
Yeah.
app. Yeah.
I think that's right, Neil. And I think this comes back to some of the last question you were asking about doing your homework and understanding the customers. That's what will tell you whether it is the right thing to do or not. So I think that's a big piece to take into account.
Cool. All right. Let's move on to something cool and very buzzwordy. AI, right? AI, it's transforming how teams collaborate and solve problems. I don't remember who said it, but yeah, I didn't believe that we would have these coding assistants that are just basically everywhere now in every IDE. I'm waiting for my Vim to actually have a coding assistant. I wouldn't doubt that there is one already. But how do you see AI enhancing system of work? Ian, I'm go with you because I know your current role at Atlassian heavily involved with AI and Rovo. Can you share examples or ideas for leveraging AI to create like smarter or more impactful apps?
Yeah, I'm glad you acknowledged Copilot. It's the sort of the elephant in the industry. It has set a lot of people's expectations about what AI is going to mean for software. But in a way, I think it's like it's like no, It's not about making each developer shave a couple minutes off of every coding task. That's peanuts. Where the real savings for businesses is in the handoffs between their teams, and therefore in a larger level team efficiency kind of thing. And I think that happens when you can see those like I don't know, in the awkward handoffs. If a Jira issue only has the summary filled out and no description, how can you actually accomplish that task? So then there's a back and forth between the developer and the product owner. No, I need the details. Now you need to give me the acceptance criteria. But if an agent can be there with the product owner, helping them understand what will be needed by the downstream teams, then you're saving all of that wasted back and forth effort. So that's the kind of thing that I am talking to customers about every day. And in terms of helping bake that quality into the overall software process, agents are where it's at. And it's also a big industry term, agentic AI is hot and cool, and I think that's there's good reason for that. I think that where you kind of want to look is what we're doing in our out-of-the-box agents. I was also putting in the chat here that one of the ones that ends up coming up with every one of our customers is the Jira Theme Analyzer. And I think that's because they are they understand that they have all of this data in Jira and Confluence and maybe many other places. But there's so much data that they can't find the signal anymore. It's it's drowning out what customers are trying to tell them. And so the ability to have an AI that is a sort of like the noise canceling headphones, like it kind of helps you hear exactly what you want to, and it is like what are the customers trying to tell me? That's why Jira Theme Analyzer captures the imagination. I think with Forge, the possibilities to go beyond Jira and get the signals from many sources and in many ways. There are many kinds of intuition that we can sort of imbue these agents with. Yeah, I think that's the kind of thing that will really get customers excited. Yeah, so
Awesome. No, that's very cool. And Nitin, what are some of your thoughts on AI? Like any examples about how we can leverage AI to create smarter and more impactful apps?
It is really the buzzword, right? You can't complete a webinar without mentioning about AI at this stage. But yeah, I guess the key themes I would think is probably the developer productivity or smart teamwork. I know that it's definitely not going to replace the developers. Let's be very, very clear on that one. But having AI assistants like our own like Amazon Q Business or Rovo, I think one of the coolest thing that I see on these assistants is that they bring enterprise knowledge right at your fingertip. So when you're building apps on top of this and using this AI, think how best you can use this knowledge to power automation tools or to bring streamlined workflow tasks, right? And one of the ideas that I have been grappling at myself working with Atlassian is obviously the connect to Forge migration use cases. It's a pretty big opportunity. So think if there's a way that we can leverage AI services like Amazon Q Developer or Rovo to accelerate those migrations. And last but not the least is putting an industry lens to it. Atlassian has a lot of customers. Obviously customers have in almost each and every industry at this stage. So how can these AI agents or AI, in general, solve problems related to a particular industry, whether it's related to compliance or technical documentation or what? I think the possibilities are endless. It's just that, yeah, it's the creative piece that has to take over rather than the technical piece, I guess.
Got it. Bastian, your thoughts on the AI components?
Maybe I take a role of something like a devil's advocate now, but don't get me wrong, because at Droyo we're excited about AI. I think everybody is, because it opens up so many opportunities and possibilities. For example, we built in an AI feature in Droyo ourselves, like creating diagrams with an AI assistant, and also the opportunities that Rovo offers. Of course, we're in. But before that, we talked about data security and privacy. So these two things from my day-to-day work, they are like, and they're fighting all the time. So when we are kind of like exploiting AI, the next thing that not all, but a couple of customers say, how can I switch that off so we can kind of guarantee that we don't have any cross-domain traffic? So that's what we actually built into Draw.io to kind of suit both needs. That's what we did for, I think, 2 years ago already. So my answer to this would be, especially for people creating apps, AI is exciting, but it might not be the universal answer for every app you might want to build. So sometimes, if you want to suit your target audience, which is in the banking sector or insurance or whatever, believe me, I have seen amendments just this very day, today. I've seen an amendment. I said, okay, I thought I saw it all, but this one is really the top of the pops. The security needs of big companies, they are insanely complex. And if you are the one trying to cut that down, then you probably don't have to go along with AI. So always, like, again, I know I said that a couple of times, listen to your target audience and develop for that target audience.
That's good advice. Alvaro, what are your thoughts? How do you say AI enhancing system of work?
Okay, first of all, I will say that I subscribe of the Bastian concerns. And apart of that, I will say that AI, for me, it's going to make the difference, and robo will be key for the system of work. So looking, for example, to the robo agents, having the possibility to have different robo agents, for me, is a key approach, is a really good approach for that. And I'm thinking about, for example, different people with different roles inside the company, talking with different robo agents that are going to look to the same information, but are going to provide different insights for these different roles. So every people with different roles in the company are going to get more accurate insights depending on their roles. So I think AI is going to be really good for that. It's going to save a lot of time. So the productivity is going to increase. The collaboration may be increased too. And as I was talking in the beginning, these are key factors for a company. And then also thinking about the knowledge. So as I was saying, for collaboration, if we want to improve the knowledge of the company, people perhaps are going to share more information, maybe in Confluence or whatever, because they are going to take advantage of that, because Robo is learning from that. And they are going to get better insights if they put all the knowledge there. So I guess that for that, Robo is going to be, and AI are going to be key in the future. And finally, here I want to say that as the people maybe working on Robo and a Robo agent for the Codegeist, it's not difficult to build one of those. So if you haven't been able to test it, go and test it. We have been working in a Robo agent for budgeting to help our customers doing the having financial information and insights, and it's quite simple. So go ahead and give it a try.
That's awesome advice. Yes, it is quite easy to build your first agent, your first customized agent, Rovo agent with Forge. We are running tight on time, so I'm going to have to ask this next one really quickly. There's another bonus category. Not just we had one for runs on Atlassian. We have another one. It's the connect to Forge migration. So migrate to Connect. So taking an existing Connect app and migrating it over to Forge, the newer dev platform. I'd like to ask the panelists that are maybe involved with that effort, highlight some key differences between the two platforms. Some advantages that developers get once they're on Forge. Any tips you have for hackathon devs who might be thinking, yeah, I have this Connect app, I'm going to make the move. Alvaro, do you have any, let's start with you. Any thoughts on that?
Okay, beginning with the differences between Forge and Connect, I will mention 3 of them. So first of all, if you have to create a Connect app, it's going to take you so long because you have to take care about the infrastructure. But having a Forge app ready is going to take you only some minutes. So I will say this is a good point for Forge. Another thing I will say here is that new technical features are going to reach Forge first. So if you are looking perhaps to have something really like a Robo agent, something like that, it's good to start working in Robo, because if not, maybe you are not going to be allowed to do it. And the other thing is that if you build a Forge app, your customers are going to rely on your app by default because it's going to be hosted in the Atlassian servers. If you are providing a Connect app, as I was saying, you need to be certified with SOC 2, ISO or something to provide this reliability to your customers.
Mhm.
So these are going to be my 3 key differences between Forge and Connect. And I have some tips. And for that, remember to have a look at the quotas and the limits of Forge before building something complex, because you may face some limitations, and it's better to realize of them just before you have decided to build them. And I will say also that as we were talking about Connect, Forge, and moving Connect apps or features to Forge, this is something you don't have to do it all at once. You can do it step by step. So there are some approaches that are in the middle, like for remote or connecting Forge. And in our case, for example, we are just almost there with a Connect in Forge approach for one of our Connect apps. We are going to release it in some weeks. And this is something you can do. And if you want to know more about it, we have applied to have a talk in the last camp 2025. So if we are selected, we can share more of our experience moving from a Connect app to a Connect in Forge one.
Awesome. Did you hear that call for papers committee? Okay. I was gonna ask more opinions on this, but I think that maybe it might be a good idea to try to take this remaining couple minutes and just address anything that's in the Q&A. But give me 1 second. And
There are some things common across Q&A and in the chat about folks who are moving from Connect to Forge. And there, I think the maybe just one quick answer would be, please do engage in our developer community. There are Forge folks there who, like from the engineering team, who can come in quite regularly and answer questions. But please don't make the assumption that Forge is a perfect match. And so I think like where a lot of times people get frustrated is they say, but I need the thing from Connect. But our engineers really need to hear more about the context. Like, what is it that you were doing with that capability in Connect? And there may be different ways that we have to solve that in Forge. So that's just trying to be helpful to that group there. Other
awesome.
question?
That's a good one. I see one question captured here that was addressed potentially towards me. I like Forge. There's a lot of feature work going into the platform, but it's hard to keep track of what's coming next. How can I track when those features are coming? High level, there is the Atlassian developers YouTube channel, and it sounds silly, but there is a roll up of like all of the key things, like kind of the big ticket items that have shipped, in a little video roll up that Katerina Kurti, one of my colleagues, organizes. In addition, there's also the change logs that you can monitor on developer.atlassian.com for each of the product platform areas that you're interested in. But I think between those two, and obviously subscribe to the newsletter as well. What else do we have? Helen, is there one that you think that we should address in our remaining 0 minutes left?
Yes, actually, there is a question from Gabriel. It's asking, it would be amazing if we can ask our hosts for any tips in terms of submissions themselves, descriptions, videos, any advice on what to have in mind when summarizing or describing your app. I think specifically for your Codegeist submission.
They could probably take a look at last year's submissions as well. And in fact, maybe even on DevPost and take a look at other events and look at the winning submissions. It's not cheating. I mean, you can actually see what, the effort that was put into it, how they describe things, etc. It's a little bit of marketing, I think, as well, right? You have to really articulate what it does well and give a little glitter on it. But yeah, that would be my advice. Anyone else?
Yeah, absolutely. Making sure that you're keeping in mind your user and your customer, and writing the description and summaries around how you're solving the problem for that customer or user. I'll also go ahead and drop the link for last year's submissions because I agree it's a great resource to kind of take a look how people were talking about their apps last year. So yeah, you can go to the project gallery and kind of take a look at the submissions from last year.
Okay. In our negative 1 minute left, do we want to pick one more?
If I can give a short answer for that, for the submission question, I will say that try to build all the documentations, the video descriptions around the use cases you are trying to solve with your app.
Right on. Not the mechanics of it, right? Like what the problems it's solving, for sure. Engineers, listen.
Perfect. Well, I think we're right over time. Thank you guys for joining us today. We'll go ahead and share out the recording for the webinar for everyone to have access to. And we'll also gather some of the questions that we weren't able to get to today and answer some of those in a follow-up email. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Good luck with all of your Codegeist submissions. We can't wait to see what you all come up with.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Take care.
Bye.